The shifting grove. The crunch of gravel beneath William's boots was the sound of peace returning. After 5 grueling days at the office, deadlines, phone calls, the sterile glow of screens, the forest promised something purer. Something real. His camera hung at his side, ready to capture the calm of autumn in the Appalachians. Orange leaves fluttered down through shafts of late afternoon light, the air cool and damp with the scent of pine and decay. He parked his SUV beside an old Ranger sign that leaned precariously, its lettering half faded. Elderwood Reserve, no overnight camping beyond mile 7. Just the weekend, he muttered to himself, slinging his pack over his shoulder. No emails. No noise. Just me and the trees. For the first hour, everything was perfect. A golden silence draped over the forest, broken only by the occasional trill of a bird or the whisper of leaves brushing his jacket. The trail wound through narrow switchbacks and opened into mossy clearings where the sunlight pooled in broken circles. Every few minutes, he paused to take a photo, but the crimson canopy, a trickling stream, a patch of mushrooms glowing faintly in the shade. But when he scrolled back through his camera roll an hour later, a frown creased his face. In one photo, a tree he didn't remember, thick and twisted, stood in the center of the frame. In another, a branch seemed to form an unfamiliar symbol against the sky, like an arrow, or maybe a rune. He squinted. The photos looked real enough. The lighting was consistent. But something about them was off, like the forest was editing itself. He laughed softly. Maybe I'm just tired. He took another picture of the same clearing, determined to prove himself wrong. When he compared the 2 shots side by side, his stomach tightened. The boulder near the creek had moved, not by inches, but by several feet. The moss pattern had changed too. Okay, he whispered. That's not possible. He glanced around, the air suddenly colder. The forest seemed to lean closer, the branches whispering above him. Maybe he'd stepped onto another path without noticing. Maybe the camera lens had glitched. There were a dozen rational explanations. Still, when he turned to head back toward his camp, the trail didn't look the same. The fork that should have led to the parking lot was gone. The ridge he'd climbed earlier had shifted to the opposite side. The landmarks were wrong, as if the entire forest had quietly rotated while he wasn't looking. He walked faster, checking his compass, but even that seemed uncertain, the needle twitching back and forth. The wind had picked up, carrying a low hum that sounded almost like whispering, too soft to make out words, too rhythmic to be natural. He raised his camera again, almost on instinct, and snapped another photo. In this one, the shadows between the trees formed a symbol he didn't recognize, 3 circles overlapping, like some kind of ritual mark carved by darkness itself. William lowered the camera slowly. His pulse was racing now. Every direction looked identical. Every sound echoed back. All right, he muttered. Just keep walking. It's a forest, not a maze. But the deeper he went, the more the world around him seemed to twist. The light dimmed. The trees grew closer together. And when he looked behind him, the trail he'd just walked was gone. Only more forest. Endless. Silent. Watching. The forest had swallowed the trail. William stood where the path should have been, spinning slowly in place, waiting for some landmark, any landmark, to ground him. but every direction was the same, trunks rising like pillars in an old cathedral, branches curling overhead, a silence so thick it pressed against his ears. He took a deep breath and tried to calm the tremor in his hands. Okay, Will. You just turned around. Happens all the time. Sun sets west, follow it. You'll hit the road eventually. He checked his compass again. The needle spun lazily, jittered, then stilled, pointing east, or what it claimed was east. He started walking. The silence deepened as the light shifted from gold to gray. The deeper he went, the more the forest changed. Roots knotted across the ground like veins. The trees tilted at impossible angles. Their bark had begun to peel, revealing black streaks beneath, almost like burn marks. After 20 minutes, William stopped and took another photo, more out of habit than reason. The camera clicked, the shutter echoing faintly. He looked at the image. The photo showed him standing in a clearing, but there was something behind him. A faint blur among the trees, tall and human-shaped, half hidden in shadow. He whipped around. Nothing. Just the whisper of wind and a crow's distant cry. A cold sweat crept down his neck. He zoomed in on the photo. The figure wasn't just a trick of light, it had depth. Shoulders. A head slightly bowed. He could almost see fingers reaching out from the blur, brushing the edge of the frame. His throat went dry. No. No, that's impossible. He snapped another picture, of the same spot. This time, the clearing was empty. The blur was gone. But the trees had shifted again, he could see it clearly now. They were leaning inward, curving toward the center like ribs forming a cage. Maybe it's the exposure, he told himself aloud. The lens is old. Autofocus error. But even as he said it, his voice sounded hollow. The forest wasn't just rearranging, it was responding. He walked faster, refusing to look at the camera. The light was dim now, the sky a dull bruise between the branches. Every few minutes, he thought he heard footsteps behind him, soft, careful, always stopping when he did. By the time he reached another clearing, his nerves were frayed. He sat down on a fallen log, took a sip of water, and forced himself to review the photos again. Maybe the sequence would make sense. The first few images looked normal, the trail, the stream, the mushrooms. Then came the ones that didn't line up. Trees in new places. Stones rearranged. The dark blur growing more distinct frame by frame, as if it were moving closer. And then he reached the last photo he'd taken, the one he'd just snapped, moments before sitting down. It wasn't the clearing. It wasn't even the forest. It was a photo of him, sitting exactly as he was now, on the same log, head bent toward the screen. Only in the picture, there was someone standing right behind him. William's breath caught. His entire body froze. Slowly, he lifted his head. The forest was silent again, except for the sound of leaves rustling just behind him. He turned. Nothing there. Just the fading light and a camera that suddenly felt far too heavy in his hands. He stood, trembling, and began to walk again, this time not toward anything, just away. Away from the clearing, from the shadows, from whatever game the forest was playing. But as he walked, the air thickened. The trees grew closer, their roots clawing at the soil like fingers. And when he glanced at his phone for a GPS signal, there was none. Only static. The screen flickered once, and the camera app opened on its own. Another photo appeared on the screen. This one hadn't been taken yet. It showed a trail he didn't recognize, and a figure waiting for him at its end. The forest had grown still again, unnaturally still, as if every sound had been swallowed. William's heart thudded against his ribs as he stared at the image on his camera screen. The photo was clear this time. A narrow trail he didn't remember taking. A dark, arching canopy of trees he hadn't seen before. And at the end of that path, standing perfectly still, was a figure. The shape was unmistakably human. But the more he stared, the less it seemed right. The proportions were off. Its limbs too long. Its stance too still. He zoomed in, but the pixels warped, refusing to reveal a face. The image seemed to fight back, resisting detail, like the forest itself was censoring its secrets. He glanced up. The world around him hadn't moved, but something inside him said it had changed. The air was heavier, as though it carried weight. The trees leaned closer together, their tops whispering faintly in a wind he couldn't feel. "All right," he muttered, tightening his backpack straps. "You're losing it, Will. Just a bad lens, bad lighting, pareidolia." Then, from the corner of his eye, he saw it. A narrow path leading off to the left. It looked exactly like the one from the photo. The same twist of branches overhead. The same leaning trees forming a natural arch. His pulse quickened as dread and curiosity wrestled in his chest. He wanted to turn back, but there was no back anymore. Every direction looked the same. So he followed. The path wound deeper than he thought possible. The forest thickened, its colors muted into grays and dark greens. Each step felt muffled, as if the ground absorbed sound. After a while, he noticed that even his breathing seemed quieter. He raised his camera again, almost against his own will, and snapped another picture. This time, the image showed something that hadn't happened yet, the same path, a few yards ahead, but the figure was closer now. Still faceless. Still watching. William swallowed hard. "It's not real," he said under his breath, gripping the camera like a weapon. "It's some kind of glitch." But the air had changed again. It wasn't just quiet, it was listening. The silence was too complete. Even the usual forest sounds, birds, insects, the wind, had vanished. The only sound left was the faint click of his camera when he tried to take another shot. He forced himself to move forward. The path grew narrower. The trees pressed closer until their branches brushed his shoulders. Each one looked subtly different than a second before, a knot that wasn't there, a split in the bark that hadn't existed. The forest was rearranging itself around him now. Finally, the path opened into a clearing. The ground here was blackened, the soil scorched. In the center stood an enormous oak, its bark etched with deep, spiraling grooves. They weren't random carvings, they formed a symbol. The same 3 overlapping circles from his earlier photo. His camera buzzed in his hand. He looked down. It was taking photos on its own, click after click, aimed straight at the tree. The screen flickered between images. In each frame, the grooves in the bark shifted slightly, forming new shapes, letters, maybe, or numbers, like the forest was writing. Then, on the seventh photo, the message became clear. The grooves now spelled two words in a looping, unnatural script. Turn around. William froze. He didn't want to. He couldn't want to. But something deep inside him, something instinctive, forced his muscles to move. He turned. The camera slipped from his hand. Standing in the middle of the path behind him was the figure from the photos. Closer now. Motionless. And this time, the forest didn't bother to hide it. It wasn't a shadow. It wasn't a blur. It was tall, impossibly tall, its limbs bending wrong, as if its joints were made of wood and darkness. Its head tilted slightly, studying him, and for the first time, William realized what the forest had been doing all along. It wasn't just rearranging itself. It was leading him. And now, he'd arrived. William couldn't breathe. The thing at the end of the trail didn't move, but its stillness was wrong, intentional. The way the branches above seemed to hold their breath with it. The forest was waiting, like everything around him existed in service of that figure. He took a step back. The ground groaned beneath his boot, the sound far too loud in the suffocating quiet. The figure's head twitched. That was enough. Panic detonated in his chest. He span and ran. Branches clawed at his jacket, thorns tore across his sleeves. The forest seemed to tighten around him, trunks shifting subtly, bending toward his path. The deeper he ran, the less familiar everything became. The ground dipped and rose where it shouldn't. The slope he'd climbed earlier was gone, replaced by an endless web of roots and narrow hollows that threatened to trip him. He didn't care. He just ran. His camera swung widely from its strap, slapping against his hip. The lens clicked once. Twice. Then again. He hadn't touched the button. He slowed just enough to grab it, still running, fumbling with the power switch. The screen was on. A new photo had appeared. It showed him, caught mid-stride, terror carved into his face, and behind him, the figure, impossibly closer. He hadn't turned around. He didn't need to ***. The forest was documenting him. He hurled the camera into the undergrowth and kept running. But a moment later, another click echoed through the trees, faint, distant, like a shutter miles away. Another. Another. A chorus of cameras snapping from somewhere unseen, capturing him from angles that couldn't exist. "Stop," he shouted, the word shredding his throat. "Stop." His voice died against the air. It didn't echo. The sound went nowhere, as if the forest had swallowed it whole. He stumbled into another clearing, smaller than the last. The same black soil. The same oppressive air. The oak tree loomed here too, or another one just like it, its bark carved with the overlapping circles again. Only this time, there was a new pattern carved beneath. A spiral leading downward. The message pulsed through his skull before his eyes finished reading it. "Keep going." William backed away, shaking his head. No, I'm done. I'm done." He turned and took 3 steps, and the world shifted. The clearing was gone. He was standing in another one. Identical. Same tree. Same spiral. Same whispering air. His pulse hammered against his temples. He turned again. The clearing changed again. Every direction led him right back to the same center. He was trapped in repetition. Something inside the oak groaned. The trunk split slightly, revealing a black hollow, deep and pulsing like a wound. It wasn't empty. Inside, something flickered. Something like light, but not light. A reflection. He realized, too late, that it was reflecting him. The moment he saw his own face in the hollow, the camera behind him, the one he'd thrown, went off again. The flash ignited the clearing for half a second. When his vision cleared, the figure was there, standing just beside the tree. It hadn't walked. It had appeared. William stumbled backward, tripped over a root, and fell hard. He scrambled up, every instinct screaming to run, but the forest had stopped moving now. The silence had returned, thick as tar. The figure tilted its head again, and the tree seemed to lean with it, as if acknowledging a command. His camera lay at its feet, lens cracked, still taking photos on its own, rapid bursts now, the flash firing again and again, capturing something he couldn't see. He turned and ran anyway, deeper into the dark, his own voice shaking as he gasped for breath. "Just let me out," he whispered. "Please, just let me out." But the forest was already rearranging again, sealing the path behind him. And somewhere in the shadows, another click sounded, not from his camera this time, but from something else. Closer. Hungrier. Recording his panic, frame by frame. William didn't remember stopping. He only realized he had when he felt the burning in his lungs and the trembling in his hands. His flashlight beam shook across the trees, slicing through the black, revealing flashes of bark, dirt, and shadow. He was alone again. At least, he thought so. The forest had gone quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that feels pressed against your skin. He leaned against a tree, trying to steady his breathing, trying to think. Every logical explanation had vanished hours ago. Or minutes. Or, how long had it been? He checked his watch. The screen was black. Dead. Then his eyes caught something on the ground a few feet ahead. A glint of white among the leaves. He crouched slowly, hand shaking as he brushed away the dirt. It was a photograph, a physical print, glossy and fresh, edges still damp like it had been developed minutes ago. The image made his stomach twist. It was him, standing in this exact clearing, head tilted down, reaching for something on the ground. The same photo he was taking now. He looked up, half expecting to see the camera that had taken it. Nothing but trees. He turned the photo over. 3 words were written on the back in thick, black ink. "Don't look up." His heartbeat became a hammer. He froze. The air seemed to thicken with the weight of those words. Every instinct screamed to disobey, to look, to see, but something deeper held him still. He stayed that way for what felt like an hour, until the forest's breath eased, and he dared to move again. He pocketed the photo and stepped forward. Then he saw another one. And another. Each print lay in a perfect line, half buried in the soil, leading deeper into the forest like breadcrumbs. He followed. The first showed him walking, his flashlight beam catching the next photo ahead. The second showed him from behind, the trees bending slightly toward him. The third. He stopped breathing. The third showed him standing at the edge of a ravine, staring down into darkness. He hadn't reached it yet, but it was waiting for him. "Okay," he whispered, "this isn't happening. You're dreaming. You're..." A flash went off in the distance. The trees glowed white for a heartbeat, then fell back into blackness. Another photograph appeared at his feet. It was still warm. He turned it over. This one showed him leaning over a ledge, flashlight pointed into the void below. William clenched his jaw and stepped forward. "Fine," he said, voice trembling. "Let's finish this." The forest opened around him, not into a clearing this time, but into a vast hollow carved into the earth. The ground sloped sharply down into a pit of shadows, its edges lined with roots like skeletal fingers. He knew this place. He'd just seen it. He raised his flashlight. The beam barely reached the bottom, but something down there shimmered, a reflection, like water. Or glass. Another flash erupted beside him, bright and blinding. When his vision cleared, there was another photograph resting on the ground. It showed the ravine from above, from his perspective, and something else. A shape rising from the darkness below, pale and tall, with eyes that reflected the light like two perfect lenses. William dropped the photo and stumbled backward, nearly falling. But then he saw it. Down in the pit. Moving. Slowly. Deliberately. Climbing. Its movements were jerky, puppet-like, but wrong in a way that made his stomach churn. It wasn't climbing the ravine so much as emerging from it, pulled upward by the trees themselves, their roots stretching to help it rise. He ran. The forest shifted again, branches twisting, paths crossing, the air warping into corridors that weren't there before. But no matter which direction he turned, the photographs followed. Falling from the trees. Sliding across the dirt. Each one showing him seconds before he took his next step. Until finally, one print fluttered against his boot, face down in the dirt. He picked it up with shaking hands. It showed him standing at the edge of the forest, his SUV visible in the distance. Freedom. Safety. But in the reflection of his car window, the figure was already waiting. The forest thinned suddenly, like the trees had agreed to let him go. William stumbled through the last stretch of brush and nearly cried out when his flashlight beam struck silver metal, the bumper of his SUV. The sight hit him like air after drowning. His breath came in ragged bursts, the adrenaline finally cracking his voice. He sprinted the last few yards and threw himself against the driver's side door, fumbling for his keys. They fell into the dirt, his shaking fingers useless in the dark. The world around him hummed, a low, vibrating tone, as though the trees were whispering farewell. He finally jammed the key into the lock and yanked the door open. The interior light flicked on. It looked different. He hesitated. The seat covers weren't the same color. His jacket, the one he'd left on the passenger seat that morning, was gone. And his phone, plugged into the dashboard, was glowing with a screen he didn't recognize. The clock read 12:09 a.m. He'd left before noon. He'd only been gone a few hours. Hadn't he? The first thing he saw when he sat down was a photograph waiting on the dashboard. Glossy. Fresh. Still warm to the touch. It showed his SUV parked right where it was now, but the forest behind it was wrong. The trees leaned toward the car like they were listening. William's stomach dropped. He looked up through the windshield. The forest stood still, perfectly ordinary. For now. He started the engine. The headlights cut through the mist, white and harsh. Gravel crunched beneath the tires as he slammed the accelerator. He didn't look back. The road out of Elderwood twisted through the hills, and he gripped the wheel so hard his knuckles ached. The rearview mirror showed nothing but black. After 20 minutes, his breathing began to steady. The road signs were familiar again. Civilization was only a few miles away. He laughed once, broken, exhausted. "You made it out," he muttered. "You?" His headlights flickered. The dashboard lights dimmed. And then the stereo came on by itself. It wasn't music. It was static, faint at first, then sharpening, like film developing. Click. The unmistakable sound of a camera shutter. He turned the radio off. The sound continued. Louder now, echoing through the cabin. Click. 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 He slammed the brakes and grabbed the camera from the passenger seat, but it wasn't his anymore. The casing was cracked and warped, its lens clouded with something that looked like ash. The screen flickered to life, showing a photo that hadn't been taken. It was his car. Parked on the same road. But outside the window, the trees were closer. He stared at the image. "No," he whispered. "You're not real. You're done." He blinked. The photo changed. Now the trees were closer still, practically pressing against the car. He looked out the window. Nothing. He looked back at the screen. The photo now showed a hand pressed against the glass beside his head. A long, pale hand. Its fingers left black smears against the window. His breath hitched. Slowly, he turned toward the driver's side window. Nothing there. Just the faint reflection of his own terrified face. He faced forward again, and froze. The forest had returned. Not behind him. Not in the mirror. Ahead. The road that should have led to town was gone. The asphalt faded into dirt, and the trees rose once more, tall and endless, their branches forming a tunnel that swallowed his headlights whole. His phone buzzed violently on the seat beside him. He grabbed it. The screen flashed with new photos appearing one after another, images of his car from above, from the sides, from impossible angles. Each one closer than the last. The final photo showed the forest swallowing the car entirely, like a mouth closing over prey. William's trembling fingers found the ignition. He turned the key again and again, but the engine only groaned. Outside, the trees creaked and shifted, their trunks moving like slow, deliberate limbs. The camera clicked once more, unprompted. The photo appeared instantly on the cracked screen. Inside the car. William staring at his phone. And through the driver's window, a face staring back. He didn't turn this time. He couldn't. The air in the car grew thick and heavy, the scent of moss and rot filling his lungs. The lights dimmed completely. And then, from somewhere deep in the dark, came a whisper that wasn't his. "You took us with you." The whisper lingered long after it ended, echoing not in the air, but in his bones. William sat motionless behind the wheel, drenched in sweat, staring at the empty space where the forest had swallowed the road. His pulse thudded in his ears. The silence was alive again, watching, breathing. He didn't remember starting the car. He didn't remember how he got home. But when he blinked, headlights reflected off his garage door. The forest was gone. The hum of distant traffic buzzed faintly. His own driveway, his own house. Ordinary. Safe. He stumbled inside, slamming the door behind him. The sound of the deadbolt locking was almost musical. He leaned against the wall, shaking, whispering, "You're fine, Will. It's over. You're home." He tossed the camera onto the counter. It landed with a dull clatter and a final click, as if protesting. The cracked lens stared at him like an eye. The kitchen clock ticked past 2 in the morning. Everything looked normal. Except the photos. They were everywhere. Hundreds of them. Scattered across the counter, the floor, the table. Some old, some freshly printed. They showed his car, the forest, and him, running, falling, screaming. Every angle possible, as though the woods had built an archive of his terror. He picked one up. It was his living room. He froze. The picture showed him standing exactly where he was now, one hand holding the same photo. But in the image, the reflection in the window behind him showed something else. A tree line. Thick and black, rising from behind his house like a tidal wave of trunks and branches. William turned toward the window. Nothing but his backyard, dim and silent beneath the moon. He laughed nervously, a broken sound. "You're cracking up, man. It's trauma. A hallucination. That's all." But when he looked again, really looked, his reflection shifted. The glass shimmered. For a heartbeat, the reflection didn't match his movement. Then, behind the mirrored image of himself, the faintest outline of trees appeared. Only a few at first, then dozens. Hundreds. Endless. He stumbled backward, knocking over a chair. The window pane flexed inward, as though something pressed from the other side. A faint scratching noise followed, not like fingernails, but like branches dragging against glass. He grabbed his phone and turned on the flashlight, flooding the window with light. The forest in the reflection disappeared instantly. Relief hit him like a wave. Then his phone buzzed. New notifications. Photos. He hadn't taken any. But there they were, dozens of new images filling his gallery, appearing one after another. He scrolled through them in disbelief. Everyone showed his house, his reflection in the windows, and the forest. Growing closer each time. The final photo froze him cold. It was a mirror shot, his bathroom, clearly taken from the doorway. He was standing at the sink, staring into the mirror. And behind him, where the shower curtain should be, was a tall, shadowed figure with branch-like limbs stretching toward him. He dropped the phone. It clattered across the tile, the screen shattering, the flashlight flickering. He ran to the bathroom anyway, adrenaline drowning out sense. He threw open the door, heart hammering. Empty. No figure. No forest. Just his reflection, pale and terrified. Then, click. The sound came from the counter. His camera. The one he'd left in the kitchen. He turned toward the hall. Click. Click. Each flash of the camera illuminated the hallway walls for an instant, bright white, then black again. The rhythm of it was mechanical. Intentional. Like a countdown. He moved toward it slowly, unable to stop himself. When he reached the kitchen, the camera was aimed straight at him, taking photo after photo on its own. He snatched it up and looked at the display. Each picture showed him standing in a slightly different position, moving closer to the camera, frame by frame, his expression growing more desperate. But then, near the end, the photos changed. He wasn't alone anymore. In the last image, the reflection of the kitchen window behind him showed the forest again, but this time, the trees weren't behind glass. They were inside. Growing up through the tile. Twisting around his legs. William dropped the camera and backed away, but the sound of creaking wood filled the air, not from the floor, but from beneath it. Something was growing. He turned toward the living room, and froze. The wallpaper split open in long vertical seams. Bark pushed through. Branches reached from inside the walls like veins bursting under skin. The smell of damp earth filled the house. His photos were everywhere, still fluttering across the floor. And now, as he watched, the trees in each image began to move. Slowly. Steadily. Like they were growing in unison with what was happening around him. William stumbled back toward the front door, tripping over photo after photo, each one flashing new shapes, new faces in the shadows between trees. He tried to scream, but the air was thick with the smell of pine and soil. The last thing he saw before the lights flickered out was his reflection in the glass of the door. Behind him, the forest had already taken root. The morning light slid through the blinds in thin, trembling lines. To the neighbors, William's house looked ordinary, maybe a little neglected, maybe quiet, but ordinary all the same. The mail sat untouched. The car was parked crooked in the driveway, engine cold. When the first police cruiser arrived just after 9, Officer Hart tapped twice on the front door. No answer. Again, harder this time. Still nothing. Dispatch, she muttered into her radio, "This is Hart, Unit 14. I've got a welfare check at 288 Clearwater. Neighbor says the occupant hasn't been seen since yesterday. Car's here." Copy that. Proceed with entry if needed. She tried the handle. Unlocked. The moment the door creaked open, the smell hit her, damp, earthy, wrong. Like mulch left to rot. She stepped inside, flashlight cutting through the dim. The air felt humid. The walls were damp to the touch. As her light panned across the living room, she froze. The wallpaper was bulging. Splitting. Thin strands of what looked like roots crawled from the seams, tracing along the baseboards. The floorboards were warped and soft under her boots. She took a cautious step forward, the wood groaning in protest. Then she saw the photographs. Hundreds of them. Scattered across every surface, walls, floor, kitchen counters, even clinging to the ceiling like leaves caught in a web. Some were black and white, others color, some still dripping wet with developer chemicals. They showed the same man, dark hair, stubble, hollow eyes, wandering through a forest. The same forest. Over and over again. "Jesus," she whispered. What the hell happened here? Her partner, Officer Fields, stepped in behind her. Smells like a swamp. You see this? He crouched to pick up one of the photos, then frowned. It's still warm. Warm. Yeah. Like it just came out of a printer or something. Hart looked toward the kitchen, and froze. The tiles had cracked apart. Something black and fibrous grew up through the seams. At first she thought it was mold, but as she looked closer, she saw tiny buds sprouting along the strands. Bark. Actual bark. It wasn't invading the floor, it was part of it. What's, Fields began, then stopped. His voice had gone hollow. Hart. She turned. He was holding a photograph. A new one. Still developing. It showed the two of them, standing exactly where they were now. Same angle. Same expressions. Same flashlight beam cutting across the floor. Hart's breath caught. How? A faint click echoed through the house. Both officers spun toward the sound. It came from the kitchen counter, where a camera sat, its lens cracked, screen flickering. The same one from the photos. It took another picture. The flash burst once, lighting the room for half a heartbeat. Fields swore under his breath. That thing's not even, it's not even plugged in. Hart took a step closer. Don't touch it. The camera clicked again. And again. Each photo that rolled from its base was instant, fully formed, and wrong. The first showed the two of them looking at the counter. The second showed Fields leaning forward. The third. She stopped breathing. The third showed the kitchen empty. No Fields. No her. Only the roots. And the forest behind the walls, taller now, clearer, like it was growing outward through the frame. The sound of splintering wood snapped her attention up. The roots in the kitchen were moving, thickening, pushing upward, cracking tiles like glass. From beneath them came a muffled creak, deep and rhythmic, like a heartbeat pulsing under the floor. Fields stepped back, tripping over a pile of photos. They fluttered across the ground, all showing the same moment from different angles, the two officers in the kitchen, the roots spreading faster. Hart lifted her radio. Dispatch, we need. Click. Another photo. She turned. The camera lens was pointed directly at her now. A new photo slid out. This one wasn't a still image. The trees in the background were moving. She dropped the radio. Fields, she whispered, her voice barely audible. We need to. But Fields was gone. His flashlight rolled across the floor, coming to rest against a new photograph. Hart picked it up with trembling hands. It showed the kitchen again, empty except for her. And behind her, in the reflection of the oven glass, a tall figure stood in the doorway, its limbs branching like antlers, its eyes two pale, unfocused lights. Hart turned slowly. The doorway was empty. For now. The air grew thick again, the smell of soil stronger, almost choking. The camera clicked once more, the flash blinding her. When the light faded, she realized something awful. Every window in the house now showed trees. Not the neighborhood. Not daylight. Just forest, endless and dark, pressing against the glass like a reflection that had replaced reality. The radio on the floor crackled once, faintly. Unit 14, status check. Hart never answered. The forest was quiet again. Not the silence of peace, the silence of something complete. William stood among the trees, his breath clouding in the dim amber light. His camera hung from his neck, cracked but whole again. The same camera he thought he'd left behind. The same forest that had swallowed him and spat him into nightmares. Only now, there was no house. No car. No police. No time. Just him, the dirt beneath his boots, and a circle of photographs spread out across the moss. He dropped to his knees. The prints were damp and gleaming, their edges curling like autumn leaves. Each one showed a piece of his life, but not as memory, not anymore. They were doors. In one, he saw himself sitting at his kitchen table, sunlight spilling through the blinds, coffee steaming beside him. In another, he stood in his childhood bedroom, looking at the glow of fireflies through a summer window. In another still, he was older, grey at the temples, smiling faintly beside a woman whose face he couldn't quite remember. Every photo pulsed faintly, as if they were breathing. He reached for one, the image of his home, the one that had once burned with light. The moment his fingers brushed its surface, the forest fell away. He was there again. Sitting at the table. The coffee warm. The world calm. The birds outside singing. For a moment, he smiled. "It's over," he whispered. It was all. But then he saw the photograph on the table before him. The one he'd taken in the forest. He looked closer. In the photo, he was sitting here, exactly as he was now, looking down at this same image. A shiver rippled through his spine. The air thinned. The colors dimmed. The walls began to ripple like water, and the room fell inward, melting into bark and branches. The bird song twisted into whispers. He was back in the forest again. William staggered backward, gasping, staring at the photos scattered around him. Each one shimmered with a different life, a different story. Every time he looked into one, it pulled him through, showing him another version of himself. 1,000 paths, 1,000 timelines, all waiting for his gaze to awaken them. His breathing turned ragged. "They are not memories," he said aloud. "They are traps." The forest answered with a rustle, the sound of shifting leaves, rearranging trees. The ground itself seemed to move beneath him, forming new paths and sealing old ones. Every direction twisted into another reflection of itself. He picked up one of the photographs. It showed him running through the woods, desperate, the camera clutched to his chest. As soon as he looked at it, he was running. Branches whipped his face, dirt sprayed beneath his feet, his lungs burned. He blinked, and when his eyes opened, he stood still again, back at the same circle of photos. Each image was a life. Each life a story. Each story ending right back here. He fell to his knees, shaking. There has to be a way out. He looked around. The trees were closer now, their bark breathing softly. Between their roots, the ground glowed faintly, the overlapping symbol of 3 circles burned into the soil. The same mark he'd seen carved into the oak. He understood now. The forest wasn't changing. It was showing him every version of himself, every road he might have taken, every moment he tried to escape. And every road led back to this place. The camera clicked once. A photo slid out, still warm, still perfect. It showed him kneeling among the photographs, just as he was now. But in the image, he wasn't looking down. He was looking up, at something behind the trees, something bright. Something open. The last path. William lifted the camera and aimed it at the same spot shown in the picture. There was nothing there, only darkness between the trunks. But he raised it anyway and pressed the shutter. Click. The flash burst, and for one heartbeat, he saw it, a doorway of light between the trees, a space untouched by shadow. A way out. He staggered toward it, clutching the photograph that still glowed faintly in his hand. The air grew colder, the ground soft beneath his steps. As he neared the doorway, the light flickered, not fading, but pulsing, like it was breathing too. He hesitated. The other photographs whispered around his feet, their voices rising like wind through leaves. Each one begged him to look, to choose another story, another life. But he knew now, each photo was a loop. Each glance, another trap. He turned his face from them. "I choose this one," he whispered, stepping toward the light. The forest bent around him, trees groaning, shadows twisting in protest. He clutched the photo to his chest and stepped forward. Only to realize the light was gone. The doorway had never been real. Just another image. Another frame. And as the darkness closed in, he understood the truth. He had never left the forest. He never would. The camera in his hands clicked once more, all on its own. The final photo slid out, fluttering to the ground. It showed nothing but the forest, endless, shifting, alive. And in its center, a man made of branches, holding a camera, forever trapped within his own picture. The end.